If you go to China, they're piloting it a few years ago in Shenzhen. So I lived overseas. If you go to Shenzhen, back in 2017, they already had facial recognition cameras there. So if you jaywalked in Shenzhen, they would immediately detect that and send you a notification, and they would deduct money from your what they call WeChat account. They use two main apps, WeChat and Alipay. So you can actually deduct your money directly from your account. This is 4 years ago, so this is not like some sort of conspiracy theory. It's not something that's going to happen 10 years into the future. This happened pre-corona in China. And so this system in China that exists is extremely advanced. They can detect if it's a man or a woman. They can guess your age. They can detect what kind of car model it is, who the manufacturer is. This is a sort of technology that we see in all these dystopian sort of films and whatever. And people keep putting it off and thinking that this is something that's going to happen later in my kid's lifetime or my grandkids. It's already here. And if this gets implemented anywhere, especially in a Western nation, it's not going away. Israel is already talking about the fourth shot. Then they're going to be going to herpes, and they're going to ask if you're gay. They're going to be asking if you ate 3 pizzas this week because it's unhealthy. If you buy certain books from certain countries, your country doesn't like you. You'll lose points in the social credit score system. So this is already the reality of the world in certain places, and we need to be aware of that if we don't want that or if we do. And to be perfectly honest, anybody who wants this vaccine passport, it's a misnomer. It's total control. Everything you do or don't do will be calculated to the point where if they can detect your GPS signal, if you have a phone on you, they can detect who you're hanging out with. Oh, you're hanging out with somebody that said something bad 9 years ago on Weibo, okay, like a Chinese equivalent to Facebook or something like that, right? Oh, you lose 2 points. Oh, you bought Japanese books, you lose 5 points because you don't like Japan. This is what is going to come here because it's already there.
And we're doing that a little bit with contact tracing for COVID, aren't we? So that they can see where you're at and who you're with.
The simple reality is that the technology that CSIS has and all these big tech corporations, they already know where you are. It's just that they don't want to shock the system too much and admit that they have it. Edward Snowden revealed all this back in 2013. He fled to Hong Kong. They wouldn't keep him there, so now he's in Russia.
Yeah.
But the NSA has all of your information. They know your Google searches from like February 9th, 2004 in a bunker in Colorado.
Help me, Rhonda.
Right? They have all this information. So, but they don't, like in the US, they have the Fourth Amendment. They're not supposed to track you forever, right? So they pretend they don't have it, but they do. If they really
Today,
want to
I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency, the group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies could be a digital version of money, a bit like a digital banknote that could be used alongside physical notes and coins. Unlike most of the digital money people use daily today, it would be issued directly by a central bank, like the Bank of England in the UK. And governments and central banks across the world are working together, looking into what having a digital currency might mean in practice. This includes issues that people care about, such as ensuring users' money would be safe and secure, that it could work with other ways to pay, would be energy efficient and available to everyone. A potential CBDC could offer businesses and consumers new ways to pay in the future. It's all part of the wider story of digital innovation that has delivered benefits to millions around the world and in the UK. The decision on whether to launch a central bank digital currency is for each country to make, and no G7 jurisdiction has yet made that choice. These decisions raise important questions about the reshaping of our economy, financial systems, and the way in which people interact with money and payments. That's why working together and careful evaluation with our international partners is essential. In the UK, earlier this year, I announced a new joint task force between the Treasury and the Bank of England to look into a potential CBDC as a complement to cash and bank deposits. We're also hearing from firms, technology experts and others. Under the leadership of the UK, this report today will help support and inform exploration of CBDCs in the G7 and beyond. With these principles, the G7 is leading an important step change in the global policy conversation. The report covers a range of important matters, such as financial stability, cyber resilience, energy efficiency, privacy, inclusion, and tackling illicit finance. These factors should all be considered when designing and potentially delivering a CBDC that would be fit for the future. Our shared objective is to ensure that CBDCs will be grounded in long-standing commitments to transparency, the rule of law, and sound economic governance. The G7 will continue its work in this important area, working with others to enhance understanding and use of these principles. We're excited to be taking a leading role with G7 members in publishing this exploratory work, bringing money and finance into the 21st century.
The third way we think CBDC can improve financial inclusion is through what we call programmability. That is, CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contracts, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized, for example, for food. So this potential programmability can help government agencies to precisely target their support to those people who need support. So that way can also improve financial inclusion. Of course, I want to end with a caveat, because CBDC is not a panacea. CBDC cannot solve every challenge in financial inclusion. There are some aspects of financial inclusion is not related to technology. For example, financial literacy, digital literacy. So CBDC has to work with other policies together to try to improve financial inclusion.
A little bit far-fetched, and you might be thinking that this kind of authoritarian control over your money is not going to be anything that we'll see in the future. Unfortunately, this is already implemented in the world. In China, the government is already able to program what its citizens can and cannot spend their money on. Over the last few years, they've limited millions of people's ability to buy things like train tickets, passports, and luxury goods. They're able to do this because of China's intense social credit system that links each person's identity and actions to their bank account, allowing the government to see and to control everything a citizen does with their money. And it seems like the West is paying attention. In nations like Sweden, South Africa, and Canada, trials of programmable central bank currencies are already underway. In fact, almost half of the world's nations are at some stage of implementing this kind of programmable money, meaning no matter where in the world you live, this technology is likely only a few years away. Okay, so how does programmable money tie in with the personal carbon limit? Well, it all comes down to whether or not you've gone over your monthly usage. And if you have, there are two possible case scenarios for that. The most openly talked about penalty for a person going over their individual carbon limit is that they'd simply get charged for doing so, just the same as what happens to large companies today. Taken too many car trips this month, or bought a little bit too much meat? In that case, you'd simply get a bill at the end of each month from your government, so you can pay the price of being a naughty citizen. As your entire carbon usage would be tracked by a government CBDC, there would be no way to hide how much carbon you've used. And since they now also hold the keys to your money, they won't even need to send you a bill for your excess usage. Potentially, they'll just automatically pull your fine from your bank account.
Doing to avoid surveillance as it is. Like the UK has the most closed-circuit TV cameras of any London, and you're always smiling for the camera. But so it's bad enough as it is. But take a digital money system on top of that. And I did some work for this on the intelligence community years ago, because we were looking at, could you track, because the terrorists washed up, they got rid of their cell phones, they knew that was putting a target on their back, but they still had to get around. Could you track them using credit cards, hotel, whatever? And the answer is it's difficult, but yes. But now with a completely digital money system, it's child's play, because it's centralized by the government. So they've got you at the point of purchase. They know what you're buying. And if you're buying a book that they don't particularly approve of, or you're giving, I gave some money to the Canadian truckers for legal defense and stuff like that. And then the money, there were two. There was one that was just a fraud at GoFundMe. They took the money. We're not giving it to the truckers. They raised $9 million in 2 days. We're not giving it to the truckers. Now, bear in mind, this is all to your point about the digital world, right? But we're going to give it to some worthy cause. So that would be like some left-wing nuts or whatever. But And so there's an uproar about that, and they were going to give it back. But there was another site that came on, I think it's called Give, Send, Go. Same idea, but they're a little more honest, I guess. And I gave them some money. But then the government of Canada, and Trudeau actually isn't smart enough to do everything I'm talking about, but Chrystia Freeland is a big brain. She really is good at this. She made it a crime in Canada to support this, to support the Freedom Convoy. And I don't know if giving money count. I'm in Canada now, so I'm like, hey, Chrystia, come and get me, you know. But that's the attitude you have to adopt in the world that we're describing. So in China is got the best working prototype; they're the furthest along. But Europe is not too far behind. U.S. is a little further behind. But the point is, this is the last step in the total surveillance.
Take away the most important things in people's lives, the most valuable goods, and convince them to live like a 12th century peasant, eating gruel and surviving on the wind and sun. There is no inflation. And that is, I think, the fiat endgame. That is where the magic money tree game leads. Poverty for everybody else, unlimited money for a small select group of people, essentially government and their cronies and their banks. And that's the only alternative people have for Bitcoin so far.
CBDCs here in the U.S. are a really bad idea, Tucker, for a few reasons, but it's worth knowing the reason that economists supposedly support it, right? So the main argument is they say that actually China is doing it, and the U.S. will be less competitive, and that the dollar would be less strong if the U.S. fails to keep up. There are so many things wrong with that argument, but the first and most obvious is that that's a good path to get us to be more like China, which is not a good way for the U.S. to go in terms of being a surveillance state. And actually, it's exactly for that reason that if you think about it, the U.S. could actually have a stronger dollar if it does not jump onto the CBDC bandwagon, because people might want to actually hold a currency that doesn't allow them to be the subject of surveillance and control. So you could make the argument equally in reverse about the supposed strong dollar that we're going to miss out on without the CBDCs. And this is, of course, against the backdrop that you know well, Tucker, which is the fetishization of the strong dollar as supposedly a good end-all, be-all anyway. It actually hurts American manufacturers, and there's a very good reason why China has artificially tried to depress its currency to have a weaker yuan. So on many levels, the argument fails.
This is not an investment show, but since you're very fluent in this language and knowledgeable, what will this do to gold prices? I mean, if they get close to this, a lot of people are just going to try to opt out of the system, correct?
I would think that it has a big effect, a positive effect on gold prices. Markets have been a little bit weird in the last year where gold certainly hasn't gone up as you might have actually otherwise predicted it to in normal times. But against that backdrop, though, when you ultimately all forms of paper become meaningless and actually go into digital currencies that could be means of governments effectuating control, that might be the last stand for actually gold finally having the last laugh at the end of the day. But more importantly, Tucker, is we should not see this great reset, this dissolution of boundaries between the public and private sector, between different nations, ultimately create this new world order. And CBDCs, mark my words, are just the symptom of that deeper cancer.
Well, that is exactly right. So nicely put. Vic, it's great to see you tonight. Thank you so much.
No.